In this video, I'm going to create another package, and that package would be classes full of interfaces. What those interfaces would do, those interfaces would actually allow us to create the connection among the users, and as well as to send the messages, and as well as to update those messages, plus information of the statuses. All those things would be covered up in that interfaces. We're going to just provide the non-implementation methods in that interfaces, and then the implementation would be done in other classes. So I'm just going to create another package, and that would be like com.weather.android chatter dot and interfacer. Interfacer means the interfaces would be in this class, so I'm going to create a new class, and here I'm going to use manager. So in manager class, the manager class would actually help us to authenticate the user, like logging in, and it will also help us to save and register the user, like signing up, and as well as it will allow us to pass on the messages. So I'm just going to create a few unimplemented methods in this manager, but before that I'm going to have to make it an interface. So to make it an interface, I'm going to create a interface. At this stage you would be saying that what is interface? Well, I already assumed at the start of the course that you should be very basic familiarity with the inheritance, polymorphism, and all these concepts, which is important for Java and as well as for the creation of Android apps. So I'm gonna click on interface manager and create an unimplemented methods in here. The first one will be like public string get username. So what does get username method do? The get username method actually allows us to get the username of the device, like whether you have a demo1 username or other usernames. It will allow us to get those specific usernames. Now the next thing is I'm going to use a public string send message. So what does send message do? It's a very clear phenomena. It contains 3 parameters, like the username and the message you are sending to that username, and a message. So it will contain 3 parameters, and that is one of the most important parameters. Like for example, I'm going to use string username. So it will be the username of the person who is sending the message, and then I'm going to use string to username. It will be actually the username of a person who is receiving the message, and here I'm going to use string message. So it will be actually the message which the username is sending to username, and then I'm going to throw some exceptions in here. If there is actually an encoding exception, for example, we're going to have to actually encode this message and then decode it at the receiver's end. So if there have any encoding exception that we should know about, then I'm going to have to throw the exception through unsupported encoding exceptions. So I'm going to actually make it S and then unsupported encoding exception, and that's it. So now we have an unsupported encoding exceptions. I'm going to press enter. Now I'm going to write a few more methods. For that I'm going to pause on the video, and then after pausing on I'm going to write those methods, because those methods would take some time to write it on, and then I'll explain each and every method one by one. And here it is. Now I've written the rest of the methods to save the time on, like authenticate the user, message received is network connected. So what does authenticate the user do? It will actually when you first log in into the application, and it will actually prompt you to enter your username and password. So for that purpose, in the parameters it is actually asking you for your username and password. A message received, what does it mean? That when the user send a message to another user, then a message with the username plus message would be arrived. So that is why we are passing the username and as well as the message parameters. The next one is actually is network connected. So what does it really mean? Is network connected would allow us to configure and to recognize that whether we are actually connected to other device or not. So if we are connected, then we will be able to send the message. If not, then we will not be able. And the is user authenticated. Is your user authenticated is actually a Boolean method which will actually help us to tell that whether the user is connected means that whether the user is present in the database or not. And yeah, it is saying that get lost raw friend list. It is very important. Get lost raw friend list means that get that list of friends which is actually recently created. And exit is actually for exiting the application. Sign up user, as from its name it is clear that this method would be helping us to do some sign up processes like sign up kind of stuff, and that is why we are providing the username text and plus password text and as well as email. Add new friend request. As I've already told that this manager interface would allow us with full methods which would be important for authentication and as well as for sending the messages. So add new friend request is actually allowing the user to send the request to other person. And send friend request response means that whether the user have responded by discarding you, by rejecting you, or by approving you.